Hi, Nick. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So, Nick, you're joining us all the way from Nevada in the States. I hope I
Yes.
pronounced that correctly.
Yeah.
And welcome, welcome, welcome to Pride in the Living Room, Jewmos edition. So, a quick reminder for our new viewers. Pride in the Living Room was founded by the Israeli LGBT task force, Agudah, in memory of the 2009 Tel Aviv Gay Center shooting and the Jerusalem Pride Parade stabbing in 2015. And Ha'agudah founded this project to offer a stage and a voice to LGBT Jews from around the world to share their stories. And so it is my pleasure to welcome you, Nick, to the stage. Over to you.
Um, Thank you so much for having me. This is weird. It's like the first time that I've ever been interviewed live over video. But I it's a pleasure to be here and to be able to talk to you a little bit about myself and my background. I obviously am not what most people think of when they think of a Jew. Um, Most people tend to think of someone who is white passing, um, and that's not always the best representation of the mishpucha in its entirety. So, for myself, I was born in South Korea. I was adopted. My parents are both white. Um, I come from a German Norwegian family, and my dad's side of the family was Lutheran, my mom's was Catholic. Anyhow, it just kind of gives you a little bit of background. I was baptized Catholic, um, essentially raised somewhat in the Catholic faith. I was baptized. Um, and I didn't really realize that I was gay, or let me rephrase that. I didn't let myself realize that I was different from all the other boys until I was in high school. You know, every gay man or woman gets asked the question, when did you know? And for most of us, the answer is very young. And looking back in my life, I I now know that I did know very young that I was different from all the other boys. But at that age of, 4, 5, 6, you don't really know what that is. But I knew very young that I just had an attraction to guys. Um, Anyways, fast forward to fall of 2013. I come out as gay, and I've been learning ever since um, that coming out is more so just the step of finally realizing that you're not okay with living the lie anymore and denying this core part of who you are, this beautiful part of your ruach, your nefesh, um, and all of the work comes after. Um, just become just because you come out doesn't mean you fully um, are accepting of yourself, and that's something that I've been learning now, especially with COVID, having to deal with a lot of issues that before were so easy to just brush them aside, and now it's like they're all staring you in the face. Um, I, in my later years, was spiritual but not really religious, but I was looking for a sense of community. So this is, in a sense, answers also the question, what led you to want to convert to Judaism? And for me, I was looking for a spiritual home that I felt I belonged to, and that search led me to countless Google searches, looking on Facebook, um, and I'd read about Mormon communities, Christian, uh, gay, LGBTQ plus communities, but never really anything about Muslim communities or never really anything about Jewish communities, and I was kind of curious. So I asked Rabbi Instagram. I looked up gay Jews, and I was like, okay, yes, there are. And that sent me down a rabbit hole. I spent so much time looking up Judaism and looking up Judaism's many viewpoints on homosexuality. And before I knew it, I knew that I wanted to be Jewish. Uh, the best way I can describe it is it kind of felt like an obsession, like this burning hole inside me, this thing that was like pulling me that I just couldn't separate myself from. And that was a little over 2 years ago that happened. Um, I'd taken some time off school and I'm studying to be, well, now to finish my music degree. Um, and at the time, I did not know I wanted to be a rabbi or a cantor. At least that's what I want to be now. But along this beautiful Jewish journey, I discovered um, the beautiful world of the cantorate and the rabbinate, and I'd been looking for something that would let me express this love of music and this very spiritual connection that I have with Hashem when I sing, but also in a very practical sense, having to figure out, okay, can I make a living? Can I survive? Um, and so for me, it was like, Baruch Hashem, I finally found something that, has job prospects, and I won't be on the street, and I won't be that typical starving artist. Um, and thankfully, during my conversion process, I was a part of a very accepting community. I only had one negative interaction with the man who was about our age, Israeli, but raised in a very Orthodox setting. And he told me that no one could know that I was gay, that I had to eat cabbage to like correct the gayness, which did not make any sense. And the whole entire time he's telling me this, I'm like, but Rabbi knows. The rabbi who was sponsoring my conversion. And that was the very first thing I asked my sponsoring rabbi when I met him is, I'm gay. Is that okay? And uh, it was a non-issue. I've learned through my time within the Jewish community that Judaism and the Jewish community has to be one of the most accepting communities of the LGBTQ plus community. Um, Obviously, there are uh, very much issues that need to be corrected. It's not all fun and roses and unicorns, um, much like Tel Aviv Pride is. I remember going to Birthright I went on a queer Birthright trip, and it was during Tel Aviv Pride, and that was the most amazing experience of my life. Never had I been surrounded by so many people that were just like me. Um, yeah, I completed my conversion a little over a year ago in March. So it's been officially a little over a year as an official member of the tribe, as they say. And now I'm trying to work through all of the baggage that most gay men have. Um, you might be asking what that is if you're watching and you're not um, a member of the queer community, but most gay men tend to have to unlearn very negative messages, such as getting rid of internalized homophobia, unlearning the lessons of toxic masculinity, um, grappling with this sense of what it means to be gay and also what it means to be a man, and both together. And now you throw what it means to be a Jew and a Jew of color and a Jew by choice. You get this whole hodgepodge of beautiful contradictions slash intersections, and it can be very confusing, but it's all about experiences and trying to make sense of it all, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. um I was never bullied for being gay. I had the most accepting family. I essentially didn't even have to come out. My mom knew. um I was the kind of kid who had this wild imagination. I would play make believe. I remember one time I had these like foam like puzzle pieces, and I like made a coffin and pretended to be Dracula on the landing of our staircase. Fond childhood memories, but somehow along the way, being exposed to media, you tend to learn the very specific things that one, um, to be considered a man, you have to act a certain way. And within the gay community, which most people, I'd say, tend to overlook, there's this sense of you have to also act a certain way, look a certain way to be accepted within the community. When we talk about, look, you go on any gay dating app, you look at most people's profiles, there's no fats, no femmes, no Asians. And unfortunately, these days, the moment you mention that you're a Jew, you get told, well, you're a horrible person for what you do to the Palestinian people, and you have to deal with the ugliness of anti-Semitism within our own community. Um, but that's where being educated about, one, the rights that queer people do and do not have, um, is important, and also understanding the history of um, the Jewish people, Eretz Yisrael, uh, is also critically important as well. So that way, when you do get approached with those issues, you can not only hear the other side's narrative, but begin to heal um, those wounds of misunderstanding and hurt and anguish, and hopefully start to build this bridge towards a brighter future. Um, and I know some might say the age of Mashiach. One day he will come. Um, he or she. Um, but yeah, that's a bit of my backstory in as much of a nutshell as I can put it in. Most of my friends tease me and they're like, Nick, you should just be a rabbi. I'm like, why? Because we ask you something, and then 3 hours later, you finally get around to answering the question we asked you at the very beginning. But yeah, that's essentially my story, and how I got to where I am now.
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for sharing your beautiful story with us. Um, I think it's really valuable to hear the perspective of someone who has found their way to Judaism later in life. You know, a lot of people I've spoken with grew up Jewish, and then later in life they've discovered they're gay, non-binary, transgender, and they have to wrestle with who they are versus the culture that they grew up with as a kid. Um, and so it's really interesting to hear that you had it the other way around. You were gay first, and then you made the choice to discover Judaism and to enter into that world. Um, so thank you so much for sharing that really amazing perspective.
Of course.
I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I love answering questions.
So you said that you came from a Lutheran and a Catholic, well, one parent's Lutheran, one parent's Catholic, grew up mostly
Yes,
Catholic, you've been baptized, um, and you're now living a Jewish life. Um,
correct. I can't, there's no going back now.
so I'm just wondering, how does Judaism feed into your life now, and what relationship do you have with Catholicism or Lutheranism these days?
Well, I guess I should clarify. My dad, even though his family is Lutheran, he's non-practicing. My mother grew away from the Catholic Church. She now is very, very much so spiritual, um, but not necessarily prescribing to any one set religious dogma. For me, it's an everyday struggle, which is both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because every single day you get to reaffirm your devotion to Hashem and your choice to be living this life in adherence to these mitzvot, which, as constricting as they seem, also provide the space for one to be completely present in the moment. Um, and so every day it's a struggle. I'll admit I I'm not perfect, but one thing I've learned is that Hashem does not expect you to be perfect. If he did, there would be no. I mean, it's kind of telling that I'm saying this, especially given the month we're in of Elul. But if he expected us to be perfect, there would be no Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or Al Chet. Um, year round. For those who don't know, in the Shachrit service, in the morning service, there's, and also in the afternoon and I believe evening service, there's a section where you have to um, bang your chest in recognition of um, errors that you might have made. But if he wanted you to be perfect or she wanted you to be perfect, we wouldn't have that. Um, so I've learned very much that as much as there's this feeling of still being an imposter, um, and always feeling like I have to be better and know everything, I'm still every day trying to grapple with the sense of I don't have to know everything. I'm not ever going to know everything. And I don't have to expect myself to be perfect. That every day it's if don't get around to putting on tefillin, or if I don't get around to davening, or if I decide to eat a cheeseburger, heaven forbid, lightning's not going to come down. It's all going to be fine. But the next day is a new day. So I'd say that's where I am right now. It's just remembering to take it day by day, especially with everything as messed up as it is right now. That's all you can do. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. And thank you for sharing your amazing perspective on all of this.
Of course.
Um, so you said something really beautiful about coming out. You said coming out was about not denying who you are, about
Yes.
making the choice to no longer deny who you are. And I think that's a really beautiful way to phrase it. I think there's a lot of people who will resonate with those words. Um,
Yeah.
how have you found the coming out process I mean, you've touched on this a little bit, but do you have any more thoughts on being out as a gay man in Jewish spaces and out as a Jew in gay spaces?
I recently made a Facebook post that for me, sometimes I still wish I was straight. Um, I think as much as things do get better, and I don't want people to think that I'm not proud to be who I am, um, or that things don't get better. There are plenty of examples of queer individuals who come out and have beautiful, thriving lives. But for me, I'm still grappling with that sense of delayed development. All of our peers got to work through all of these different issues when they were in primary school, elementary school, high school. They got to go through the dating, they got to go through how do you interact with someone that you're attracted to, but maybe they only want to be friends. How do you, and you know, just navigate everything. And so that's been one of the things that's been really frustrating for me is dealing with the growing pains that come after you come out and all of the development that comes. And while that development is important, and while, as they say, this too shall pass, it does pass. It while you're in it, it's very frustrating. Um, but I'm enjoying this journey of unpacking that. I was actually writing them in my journal today, and I decided to go all the way back to the beginning and ask myself, okay, what has my queer evolution been? And when did I first know? And for me, that's been a really great exercise because I've been able to meticulously go through youth, and I'm still in youth right now, but realizing every single moment um, that I knew I was gay. And now, um, one of my friends, David Fair, um, who is a beautiful man. If you haven't heard him sing, you should find him on Facebook. He's a beautiful member of our tribe and our community and an almost chazan. Um, but he once said to me, what you are is not wrong. And that's in the sense that I had had some experiences, and one of my friends, straight guy, um, kind of judged me, and I felt like this horrible human being. And I had this conversation with him, and David said, "You're not a bad person." And I think that that's something that every gay man at some point in his life needs to hear from someone. You are not a bad person. There is not anything wrong with you. And it's all about now, for me at least, learning how to accept myself and how to move past this feeling of sometimes loathing yourself, especially when people don't always understand what it is to be gay or what it is to be immersed in queer culture. So that's essentially where I am right now. It's going through a lot of things, and we'd be here all day. Um, but it's to answer your question, it's rough, but it's also the most beautiful journey.
What you talk about so eloquently is a challenge that many, I would argue, every single queer person faces in their life. This idea of the world is feeding me one message, but the reality is that I am what I am. I exist as I am. So I inhabit this body 24/7. Whatever that says, I'm I'm myself. So I need to learn to fall in love with this. This follows me around everywhere. So I need to learn to fall in love with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I,
I've sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Um, what you just said brought me back to a conversation I had with my Hillel director. You're talking, we tend to have long talks about just philosophy and Judaism. But one thing I wish all of my queer brothers and sisters who are Jewish could hear is we all talk about the concept of this divine spark, this um, light, this piece of Hashem, that we're all made in, this image of this divine essence. And so when you said that, it reminded me of this conversation that I had when I finally realized that we are all a reflection of this holy being. And when you think about that, every single mundane law, mundane ritual that we think might be null and void, unimportant, you realize the beauty behind it all. That we have one of the few religious practices which really honor the individual and really foster this environment to truly love yourself and to put in that work. Um, and if I had one thing that I could impart to any young queer Jewish individual, it would be never forget that you are a part of Hashem. And who you are is valid. And also, never forget that, yes, while there are a few ways to be Jewish, halakhically, we're learning more and more And we're hearing more and more from rabbis, from cantors, from Jews upon Jews, that there's no one right way to do Jewish. And so I think the beauty will come when we all realize that and we all choose to embrace our own individual expression of the divine and our own religious practice, or expression of our ethnic identity for some. Um, and when that day comes, that's going to be a very beautiful sight to see.
That's such a perfect way for us to end our time together. I would like to thank you again, Nick, for spending this time with us to share your journey, to share your story. And I really think your words will resonate with many of the people watching. So thank you for taking part in Pride in the Living Room.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you have any final thoughts before we head off?
Well, seeing as it's no longer Shabbos, Shavua Tov, and just to everyone, remember to breathe. As mundane as that seems, remember to breathe and be present and be grateful for what you have, because as we're singing now, that can be taken away in an instant. So be grateful every day.
Here's to sharing our story in this moment and many more moments in the future. Thank you, Nick.
Baruch Hashem. Toda rabba.